Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman will join us in just a moment. Here's what we're looking at. Democratic infighting puts a budget on pause. Amanda Vinicky is live from Springfield with the latest on negotiations. City officials unveil safety plans for Memorial Day weekend.
Now we really have a seat at the table.
What AAPI Heritage Month means for Chicago's Asian American communities. We're live from Chinatown. And Glorious Voices revive a gospel musical that reimagines a classic play.
And Paris, as you mentioned, I'm in Chinatown reporting live as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Historic city council representation for this part of Chicago, a celebration of South Asian dance and culture on Devon, and a community 5K on Argyle. We'll tell you how people around the city are celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month and beyond. But first, to Brandis for tonight's top story.
Nick, thank you. Mayor Brandon Johnson, city officials, and various community leaders are rolling out their safety plans for Memorial Day weekend.
This is not just simply a strategy around policing. You have a collaboration of individuals who are committed to making sure that there's activity in Chicago. Make no mistake about it, that this administration has made it very clear that we are going to invest in people.
And here with a look at those safety plans are WTTW News reporters Heather Sharon and Matt Masterson. So the long list of speakers in today's announcement started with the positive things to do over the weekend. Heather, was that a message versus starting with a policing plan?
Absolutely. Brandon Johnson was elected on a platform to reimagine public safety, and this weekend is really the first test of that plan. And he put forward a strategy that emphasizes things to do to keep trouble from happening as opposed to addressing trouble once it happens. What we typically have heard at these press conferences, which has happened as far back as I can remember, how many more officers are going to be on the street, where they're going to be deployed, what they're going to be tasked with. We got none of that today, heralding a new approach to this typically violent weekend.
Marking a shift for sure. So here's what interim police superintendent Fred Waller had to say about CPD.
This weekend, all full duty sworn officers will have one regular day off canceled. This is a standard procedure, and officers will receive overtime pay for this.
Matt, will there be enough for police or enough police for the holiday deployments this holiday weekend?
Well, Waller believes so, but as we heard, in order to do that, he's going to have to cancel at least one day off for all these sworn officers. That's not a new strategy. The police officer has definitely done that in the past under Superintendent David Brown. That typically drew the ire of the Fraternal Order of Police, which was against all these canceled days off and holidays. Waller, though, he's the interim superintendent. He's not going to be the head of the department forever. A new permanent replacement is going to be found in the next couple months, so it's unclear going forward if this is going to be the recurring strategy going forward on these holidays.
Governor J.B. Pritzker announced that the state will send a citywide crisis prevention and response unit to Chicago for Memorial Day weekend. Heather, why is Governor Pritzker sending them versus Mayor Johnson?
Well, simply put, the state has essentially leftover money from the COVID-19 pandemic, and this is part of the anti-violence strategy that the governor is all in on, because he agrees with Brandon Johnson that to prevent sort of violence, you have to do more than just arrest people. And this is the state's way of sort of helping the city get through this weekend. Now, these so-called peacekeepers are trained in mediation, and that they are going to try to prevent retaliatory cycles of violence, which can sometimes take root on weekends where, you know, everybody's out enjoying the warm weather. Important to note, it doesn't look like it's going to get much above 70 degrees, so perhaps the mayor and the governor have Mother Nature working in their favor as well.
Matt, what do we know about these 30 people and where they were trained?
As Heather said, these peacekeepers, they're trained through state agencies like the Illinois Department of Human Services on de-escalation, interruption. These are basically street outreach workers that are going to go into neighborhoods, work on violence prevention efforts, and respond to crime scenes when violence does break out and try to help secure those scenes. These peacekeepers were sent from Pritzker, not from Johnson, but it's another effort where officials are leaning on strategies besides just the police department to try to keep violence down over these holiday weekends.
Mayor Johnson also announced that 253 grassroots groups will receive $2.5 million for neighborhoods that are hardest hit by gun violence. Heather, how will this investment help over this weekend?
Well, the idea is to give people things to do that prevents them from making bad decisions or from getting sort of wrapped up in trouble. So the idea is that instead of just sort of, hanging out with your friends and maybe sort of getting into an altercation with other people, you're going to be at a barbecue where you're having fun, you're dancing, you're listening to music, you're doing something that is not necessarily going to lead to a problem. That is the strategy. So we heard the mayor talk a lot about barbecues and sort of block parties and that sort of thing. The question is can they scale those sort of events, which will have to happen on sort of a block by block basis, to make sort of an overall difference.
And Matt, in past Memorial Day weekends, what have we seen in the past few years in terms of violence and police staffing over this particular holiday weekend?
We always hear more about officers being deployed to high traffic areas, the lakefront, the traffic corridors downtown. We didn't hear so much about that today, but it's not unusual for officers to have at least one, if not both, days canceled over this weekend. As for violence levels, it has fluctuated in recent years due to a number of factors. Of course, the COVID pandemic affected that as well. In 2020, 10 people were killed and about 50 people were shot. That went down to 3 people were being killed in 2021, and the police department touted that as one of the safest Memorial Day weekends in a decade. But unfortunately, those numbers did tick back up last year. There were 9 people killed and about 50 people shot once again.
Of course, and everybody's hoping for a safe Memorial Day weekend. We'll talk about it on Tuesday, I'm sure. Heather Sharon, Matt Masterson, thanks to you both for joining us. And you can read more about the city's Memorial Day safety plans on our website at WTTW.com/news. Now back to Paris with more of today's top stories.
And Brandon, speaking of public safety, the Chicago Police Department is failing to remove or discipline officers who make false reports. That's according to an investigation by the city's Inspector General. Deborah Witzberg's office says the department still or recently employed more than 100 officers with histories of violating CPD's Rule 14 about false reports, which poses risks to the department and the rights of criminal defendants and litigants. The IG made 10 recommendations, including firing CPD officers who make false reports. Visit our website for more on this story. Flavored vapes are now banned in all unincorporated areas of Cook County. The Cook County Board unanimously approved an ordinance that outlaws the controversial e-cigarette products, although it only affects about 42 retailers. Flavored vapes are controversial because of their marketing and the risks that they pose to addict teens and young kids to nicotine. Violators would face fines between $1,000 and $5,000. No surprise, no agreement yet on a deal to avoid the U.S. government defaulting on its debt. President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy have said they feel optimistic a deal will be reached to lift the debt ceiling before a U.S. default that could have chaotic repercussions throughout the entire economy. Today, Illinois U.S. Senator Dick Durbin noted the 6 straight days of falling stock market values and said McCarthy and House Republicans are holding the process hostage with unrealistic demands, including, he says, spending cuts to law enforcement agencies.
Does that make sense to anybody of any political party? Not to me. Whether it's the southern border or it's security in the streets of Chicago and Illinois, we need good, competent law enforcement, not cutbacks in terms of federal support.
Workers at the Peggy Notabert Nature Museum in Lincoln Park have voted in favor of unionizing. The Chicago Academy of Sciences Workers United would fall under AFSCME Council 31 and represent 45 employees who work in the museum's education, biology, and collections departments, as well as those who work with visitors to the museum. AFSCME says this is the 6th union win in the last year and a half for Chicago area cultural workers, including the staff at the Art Institute of Chicago, the Newberry Library, and the Field Museum. Workers at the Museum of Science and Industry have filed for a union election as well. And up next, Democratic infighting puts a budget on pause. Amanda Vinicky is live from Springfield with that story.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
A new set of budget delays hit the State House, meaning lawmakers are looking at session this holiday weekend. So what is the holdup? Amanda Vinicky joins us now with the answers. Amanda, what's going on?
Well, Brandis, we're at a bit of a wait and see at this point. Just yesterday, you had Governor J.B. Pritzker standing alongside the House Speaker and the Senate President announcing a budget deal. With little ambiguity there, Pritzker said that he looked forward to signing it once it reached his desk. Well, fast forward some 24 plus hours later, and there has been no real movement. No votes, which means essentially no budget. Now, there is a proposal that is ready to go, and among the highlights of it, no new taxes, but also no tax cuts, as Illinois saw both this budget year and that had been briefly contemplated for the coming one. It also does make the legally required pension payment, though you do have actuaries that say Illinois should be spending billions of dollars more to get that to the point that it needs to be at. Also, $350 million more is going to go into the school aid formula that helps the state's most financially struggling schools, and so you're looking at a boost for CPS. Now, also, while Chicago's new mayor, Brandon Johnson, will not receive all that he had asked for when he visited Springfield last month, cities including Chicago are set to receive a slight increase in their share of the state income tax. Now, despite all of that being pretty close to nailed down, and despite having that deal, other elements of the budget are still in flux, and we are waiting still to see what those potential changes could be. House Democrats met for hours this afternoon behind closed doors to discuss the budget and to discuss other proposals that are still up in the air at this hour. Now, some of the legislators told me they think that there is enough support, that the spending plan is a go. Others said, nope, not yet. You do have more House Democrats than at any point in the history of this setup of the legislature. And so what that means is Democrats do technically have the numbers to get this done. It also means that you have a whole lot of really diverse interests, and therefore you have splits among the caucus.
Amanda, what about the health care program for undocumented residents that had been a major holdup?
So this budget does not expand that program. That's despite Latino legislators really saying that they wanted to be sure that health care coverage was given to all undocumented adults. What we also don't know, however, is how much exactly Illinois is going to be spending on this program. The chief sponsor of the budget over in the Senate, Senator L.G. Sims, said that really he can't give an answer to that because it depends on how much the Pritzker administration is able to rein in costs with tools the administration doesn't yet have.
At this point, we don't know what the expenditures will be for 24 because the cost containment measures outlined in, again, the subsequent piece of legislation have not been passed and authorized yet.
Now, also not included in the budget, a tax credit for donors who help pay for scholarships for low-income students through the Invest in Kids state program that sends these students to private schools. There is definitely a last-ditch lobbying effort, but barring a change, that Invest in Kids program will end. You also have some that aren't satisfied with all that this budget does cover. For example, rape crisis centers say that they will be in crisis without more support from the state.
We came to the General Assembly asking to help bridge the gap in funding that would leave Illinois sexual assault survivors with long waiting lists for services, closure of satellite and outreach offices, and staff layoffs.
So, Amanda, what are the next steps? What's the timeline?
Well, technically, the deadline is a budget needs to be in place by July 1st. The real deadline to get that done, May 31st. If you are keen to have to work through the weekend, but what has to happen is votes from both chambers on the budget. That has to get going. And because of legislative technicalities, the absolute earliest that could be accomplished at this point will be Saturday. Okay.
Amanda Vinicky in Springfield for us. Thank you. Up next, how Chicago's celebrating AAPI Heritage Month. Nick Blumberg is live from Chicago's Chinatown community. Stay with us.
May marks Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Across Chicago, members of those communities have made the city their home while keeping their cultural traditions alive. As part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series, reporter Nick Blumberg and producer Blair Paddock have been spending time in 3 parts of town with thriving Asian American communities. And Nick joins us now from Chinatown. Nick.
Well, Paris, Chicagoans of Asian descent are the fastest growing racial or ethnic group in the city. According to the most recent census, about 7% of Chicago's population. We visited 3 communities this week: along Devon Avenue on the far north side, the West Ridge community, around Argyle Street and Uptown, and right here in Chinatown, where people are celebrating their heritage along with increased representation and visibility. On a recent night, Shalaka Kulkarni and her fellow dancers with Mandala South Asian Performing Arts are hard at work rehearsing for an upcoming performance festival. Born in India, Kulkarni wanted to dance at a young age. She made a deal with her dad that she'd take dance classes and learn martial arts.
He thought that if you are going to learn dance, then you as well be strong. Personally, it helped me in school too. It made me appreciate anyone else who is putting time and effort in doing something. The end is where the puja happens.
Mandala presents work like this classical Indian dance, but Kulkarni's work is also inspired by being part of the South Asian diaspora. She recently collaborated with a classical Japanese dancer.
Together, we created something very unique. Our Chicago artists are going out of their ways right now to present each other and help each other.
Mandala often presents its work at the Indo-American Center in West Ridge. In June, it's hosting an arts festival around the corner on Devon. It's a community with many members of Pakistani and Indian descent, but Mohammed Bozai says it's changed a lot since he was a kid helping out at his family's restaurant.
Now if you look around, we have every walk of life, race, religion, culture, in and out, and it's an amazing place. It's a melting pot, really is.
Bozai started working full-time at the popular Garib Nawaz after he graduated college and now runs the restaurant.
Everybody's favorite is butter chicken, which is mine also. I can put butter chicken on everything.
From its original location on Devon, the restaurant's expanded to UIC, Lombard, Lincoln Park, and next month to Dallas. In recent years, new fans learned about Garib Nawaz from a quirky Twitter account started by a fan of the restaurant, but even if you missed the memes, Bozai says there's something for everyone.
It might be scary at first, like what is Pakistani Indian food? Just give it a try and I'm sure you'll find something that you like.
There's plenty for potential diners to find along Argyle Street, too. The uptown mainstay is well known as an Asian culinary hotspot, including many Vietnamese restaurants.
We're from Central Vietnam, and our food is very, very different from everybody. I think that's why people like to come and try our food.
Da Nang Kitchen owner Sydney Lay says Central Vietnamese cuisine means lots of seafood dishes and bright flavors like turmeric. The daughter of street food vendors, she didn't learn to cook until she was older. Lay eventually went to culinary school in Vietnam and opened her restaurant nearly 5 years ago.
We try to do special of the month every month to create new dishes. The longer we have the business, the more I enjoy it, because when I see our customer appreciate and enjoy our food, that make us so happy.
Da Nang was one of several businesses along the street that's gotten things like microgrants, promotional help, and other boosts from the grassroots group Celebrate Argyle.
The pandemic really hindered and hurt the community with all the anti-Asian hate sentiment that was going around. We're really trying to find a way to uplift, not just from pre-pandemic times, but actually for the future.
The group's also organizing a community cleanup Saturday and a 5K on Sunday.
We have been really finding agency in our community, trying to find local volunteers and community members who are finding that voice in themselves to really be proud of their culture.
Great thing I'm seeing right now is just the whole AAPI voice, and everyone's celebrating Asian heritage. Chinatown is busy, and it's a great change to see.
Triple Crown's Spencer Ings glad to see busy streets after 3 challenging years, but he says he's still struggling to find enough staffers to keep the beloved dim sum restaurant open as long as he used to. He's hopeful about his community's future, though, especially with the election of the ward's first Chinese-American alderwoman, Nicole Lee.
And first-time Chinese majority ward, which is big, being growing up in Chinatown. Never thought that would happen, but yeah, we're here.
You know what they say, you're on the menu if you're not at the table. And now we really have a seat at the table, and we've got the opportunity to really advocate for the issues and voices that need the assistance and need to be heard.
Lee's now the second Asian American member of the City Council, along with the 48th Ward's Lenny Mana Hoppenworth, who's of Filipino descent.
I'm ever hopeful that with the new administration and 13 new colleagues, that we've got an opportunity to come together to keep people safe, to make sure that people have the opportunities that they deserve.
Speaking of keeping people safe, Lee credited the local district police as well as the Chinatown Chamber of Commerce and Neighborhood Watch with reversing a recent spike in robberies here in Chinatown. Paris.
Nick, before we let you go, there's been this whole issue of a proposed new high school on the near south side. It's gotten a lot of attention from a lot of different groups. Alderwoman Lee has been supportive of it. What did she have to say today about that?
That's right. She said it's still a priority for her and something that, as you mentioned, a lot of people have a lot of interest in. She gets a lot of questions about it. Development of that new school has been on hold amid the transition to the Johnson administration, but Lee told me she's looking forward to sitting down with the new mayor, as well as schools chief Pedro Martinez and her fellow alderwoman Pat Dowell, to try and move that project forward.
All right, still something to keep an eye on. And by the way, all the events Nick mentioned, the cleanup, the 5K, and the Performing Arts Festival, we've got details about those, of course, on our website. Up next, sounds from a gospel musical with an all-star Chicago cast. But first, we take a look at the weather.
When gospel music merges with an ancient Greek text, you could almost call it a Holy Communion. It's a revival in more ways than one, and it brings ecstatic church music into the theater. Chicago Tonight visited a final rehearsal for The Gospel at Colonus. Producer Mark Vitale has the story from Court Theater.
The spirit in all of us is not Christian, it's not Jewish, it's not Muslim, it's not Greek. Well, it's a little Greek because that's what it's about, but it's a spiritual event.
It's a rarely performed show called The Gospel at Colonus. Morgan Freeman was in the original cast in 1983, and that production inspired the career of at least one member of the audience.
I saw the original production in 1983 at Brooklyn Academy of Music, and as a result decided, hey, if classic texts and music can create such a spiritual event that lifts the entire community in that theater to a cathartic experience like one imagines in Greek theater, and yet it's contemporary for today, and it's all of us doing that together, that's what I wanted to do with my life. And so it feels like I've been preparing this for 30 years, even though we only got 2 more days to go before we open, so I can't wait.
Oh, sunlight of no light.
It is based on Oedipus at Colonus, Sophocles' 2,500-year-old play about an aging king who seeks redemption after a life of sin.
Crying hallelujah, lift him up in a blaze of glory.
One of the cast members performed in the original world tour. The role she originally played is now being performed by her daughter. The directors have high praise for the all-Chicago cast.
Man, we have one of the most talented casts I've ever worked with. You know, as an actor, I come up here in Chicago. I come up in the community here. I've been doing theater with many of these people. And somehow we got, as Charlie calls, an embarrassment of riches. I mean, we have talent, and a big goal of ours was that everybody be showcased in some way, even if it's just a line here or there, that everyone's voice be showcased.
Oh, listen, baby.
The actor-director was a finalist on The Voice, so he knows about voices being showcased. The directors are both sons of preachers. Following rehearsal, they give final notes to the cast in advance of opening night.
Yeah, I mean, taking Sophocles' play Oedipus at Colonus and putting it in the context of spirituality expressed through a Black Pentecostal worship and spirit, it's a combination of the two that creates this third thing.
I'm here to tell you, it's not one or the other. It's truly its own entity. It's a spiritual thing.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
Lots of energy there. The Gospel at Colonus just opened at Court Theater in Hyde Park. It runs through June 11th. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabee family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
That is our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to recognize its 18 attorneys selected for the 2023 Super Lawyers List.